Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming back to Jackal Nagal again. Up next we have Aaron, who's going to be talking about unleashing the power of Visual Studio Code, probably one of the more industry-changing editors of recent times, I would say. So please, everyone put your hands together to welcome Aaron to the stage.
Thanks for having me. As mentioned, my name is Aaron. I work for Microsoft as part of the cloud advocacy team. I've been doing software development and web development for longer than I'm going to admit to in a session that's being recorded and streamed out. I've used a lot of editors in my time. I got started with Pico and stuff like that, like Emacs on Linux machines when I was first at uni, and then obviously have graduated to more complex editors. But yeah, VS Code is, it's been huge in the way that it's changed how people think about simple text editors. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. And the fact that I'm here and you're stuck in a room with me for the next 45 minutes to hear me talk about a text editor, I think that's kind of a big deal. But yeah, if you want to get in contact with me after the session, ask me any questions that I don't get a chance to cover off during the talk, that's my social media and website and email address and all that kind of stuff. But before we jump into the talk, I want to thank the sponsors. I've been doing D2D conferences in Australia for 12 years now, and they can't happen without sponsors, like all the ones we've got here. Particularly Microsoft, they're an awesome sponsor. You should really come and see us at the booth afterwards. And that's where I'll be hanging out for the rest of the day. So if you do want to come and ask any other questions, find me there. But we're here to talk about the power of VS Code. So whether you're brand new to the tech industry, you're looking to get into tech, or you've been in it for the nearly 20 years that I've been in it, I hope that there's going to be something in this session for you. I've put this together because I think that it's, while it seems so simple, it's a text editor. There's so many hidden things in it. But to get started, I'm going to just make sure that, for those of you that haven't used VS Code before, or you haven't had much experience with it, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. So we're going to do a quick lap around VS Code. So this is VS Code. I've got a project of mine open there. Don't try and read the text, it's not particularly interesting or relevant. But what I want to do is I want to break down the core features of the text editor. Across the top, we have the title bar. It's where your menu systems are, and every application under the sun has got a title bar of some description. But the interesting thing about the VS Code one is that it's highly customizable. In fact, everything in VS Code is highly customizable. So at the top, it's got things like the file name of the file that we've currently got open. It's got the information about the repo. This is connected to, I'm connected to a remote VS Code instance, so I'm using it with WSL, so it's got that information in there. But you can actually edit that and change, strip out information you don't think is going to be needed or you don't want to display in there. And this can be really useful for someone that has maybe some attention issues or some neurodiversion in that regard. I can strip out the stuff that isn't, I don't need to have it there. I don't need it to tell me I'm in VS Code, because I know I'm in VS Code, for example. You can modify it to be the editor that you need it to be. We have the sidebar on the left-hand side. I actually keep mine on the right-hand side, and I'll show you why when I jump into actually editor. But this is where we have our files and our folder structure. That's all there. It's where we get to the debugger. We get to source control, so we can make our commits into the Git repo. Or is there any other source control that people still use? I'm like SVN. Oh. Now am I really dating myself? CVS? Anyone CVS? Yeah. So the other thing with the sidebar is that extensions that you can add to VS Code can also introduce things in here. So I've got a couple of additional icons down the bottom, the Azure extension, a Docker extension, and a few things like that. So that there's functionality specific to that, a complex extension like the Azure one that allows you to work with Azure resources. It's all there, and I can do it within inside of the editor. So the editor goes beyond just being a text editing place. It's also a more complex tool. There are seats up the front. Don't feel like you need to awkwardly stand around the back. Down the bottom, we have our status bar. This is, again, showing just a whole bunch of little quick pieces of information. Things like, what branch are we on in the Git repo that we've got open? Are there any errors or warnings in the project that I've got open? What's the line encodings? Because that's a painful thing. There are still seats. Please do come in. Don't feel like you need to stand in the doorway. And like what language service is being used. So this is it's a HTML file that's got open, so it's telling me it's HTML, but I can change that to, and that indicates, and that can be useful if you've working with multiple languages that maybe are more esoteric than kind of just your common run-of-the-mill sort of stuff. But again, you can turn as much of this stuff off as you want because, again, you might not want that information. You might not need it there because it's contextually irrelevant to you, or you find it distracting to have that kind of stuff all there. Then we've got our terminal across the bottom. So there's an integrated terminal in VS Code that we can open up. We can open up as many terminal windows as we can. When I'm working, I tend to have just VS Code open, and I don't even have a separate terminal app running anymore. I just pop the terminal up, run my npm commands, or run my git installs, get my git commands and stuff like that, all within here. Also, interestingly, if you do run like a node command, so like an npm start to run a web server from the VS Code terminal, it will automatically attach a debugger for you. You don't even have to do anything extra to get debugging running for like a node application. npm start, and your debugger already ready to go. And then there's actually a text editing surface as well. Like, it's been like 5 minutes, and I haven't talked about the fact that you can edit a text document in a text editor. But I mean, you can. It's obviously the core feature. It does all the things you'd expect from a text editor. It does syntax highlighting. Like errors and stuff like that will appear if the language service that you're using is surfacing that information up. And this is a HTML file. And it's got a variety of colors in there to indicate the different things inside of that. And lastly, we have our minimap view of the file. So this is like a 10,000 foot view of the file that you're in. And this is not a particularly long file, so it's all condensed up the top, and you can see even like the colorization appears there. But this can be useful if you're scrolling through thousands of like a file that's like 1,000 lines long. Not that anyone's writing like single files that are like several thousands lines. No one does that, do they? No, I see some awkward noddings of the head there. All right, so that's VS Code in a very quick nutshell, and kind of like all the different aspects of VS Code and the things that are in there. So let's now talk about like how can we use it to be productive. And for me, being productive means keyboard. Like I'm a keyboard user. I don't have an external mouse. Like when I'm using my laptop, I don't use an external mouse. I only use an external mouse at home because I have a desktop. But so I've done everything I can to try and memorize as many keyboard shortcuts as I can. I know a scary amount of Word shortcuts. So like, I can power user my way through Microsoft Word. But also in VS Code, and let's jump over. That's enough slides for the moment. Let's jump over and actually have a look at VS Code and some stuff that we've got in here. So I've got a couple of different VS Code instances open. You should be able to read the text, but again, don't worry about the text in there. This is mostly my notes, so feel free to read ahead and just then zone out to me, because this is what I'm going to be covering. But if there is only one shortcut key in VS Code that you learn, it is Control-P. This brings up, it defaults to the file picker, so I can use this to find the README file, hit enter, and opens the file I'm currently in. But we can also use this to, say, type a question mark. And here are all the other things that we can get from this. It moves on from being just a file picker to being a command palette. So I could do a greater than symbol, and then these are all the things, like the actions I can perform within VS Code. I can open the settings, or I can go to so I've actually toggled on a thing called screencast mode. So as I type the keyboard shortcuts, they'll pop up quickly on the screen. So I'm like, here's a keyboard shortcut, and you're like, I can't see the keyboard, Aaron. You're up there, and there's a screen. So I've got that turned on, so you can see. So Control-P comes to the file picker. Control-Shift-P. If I hit the correct keys. Go straight to the actions. So this is just it's a quick one, because this is probably the most common thing that you tend to do from the file picker. From the command palette. Other things I like are, like if I type view, I can get to the sidebar on the right-hand side there. Well, it defaults to the left-hand side. I move it to the right-hand side because if I expand it and collapse it, it pops in and out. If I have it on the left, let's see if I can remember how to move it to the left. I actually can't remember how to move it to the left. It's somewhere in settings. It's been so long since I've done that. Oh, was it?
Second from the bottom.
Ah, excellent. There we go. Control B hides and shows it. But this is really annoying for me because now your focal point is shifting because the editor surface is moving. So that's why I move mine to the right. Anyway, so Control P, View, and then I can go to Explorer, pop up into this bit, or Control P, View, Debug, and get to the Debug section. Yeah. So I don't have to maybe like memorize the shortcut keys. I think that's F5. I think might get you to that. I forget. But I just do Control P, View. But also then I can say in Explorer. If I was in Explorer, I can then go to like the folders or the outline view, or so I can actually navigate the sub menus within, or the subsections within inside of the sidebar using the command palette. Again, just all off the keyboard there. Another one, term for quick access to anything to do with terminals, and create a new terminal. That one's going to be down there. And a term. Whoops. Term. And then I can create another terminal. And then I can swap between them. But with terminals, they're all called ZSH because that's the shell that I'm using in this case. But it's like, well, which one's which? How do I easily know that? Well, Control Shift P, command palette, and then we're going to go terminal rename, and we'll call this Git because I'm going to use that for my Git operations. And now if I go Control P term, I can type Git and jump to that particular terminal. So this is useful if you've got a couple open. Maybe you're building an application that's got a front end and a back end, and you've got a couple of terminals open. One's running the back end, like the npm command to run the back end. The other's the front end web application. So you've got multiple terminals running node processes. Well, you could rename them so that you can jump back and forth, and you can see which one, like the log messages from the right one, easily from there. All right. So. Yeah, Control P, probably like the #1 shortcut to take away and to remember from this. Now, I'm talking a bit about screencast mode, which I've got turned on. We can get to that from settings. Control comma, we'll get to settings. We type screencast, and I have that turned on here. You can, actually, let me hide terminals. Control backtick will collapse the terminals area at the bottom. Hide and show, Control backtick. And as I said, Control B to collapse that. So with screencast mode, this can be good for pair programming as well. So you're whether you're doing it like as a remote pair programming session, or you've just got someone that's sitting next to you, and you don't want them kind of breathing down your neck trying to work out see what you're doing. Just toggling it on can be a useful thing. But you can it can be a little bit annoying because like every key stroke is getting captured in here. But I can change that and say that I only want it to show just like the commands. So if I'm using the command or alt or those kind of keys, it'll just show those up. And that can be a bit more useful, I guess, if you're doing demos and stuff like that. Change font size, change styling, and all that kind of stuff there. Another useful mode of VS Code is Z mode, Control K, Z. You want to kind of turn off as many of the distractions as you've got because you're in the moment, like you're trying to get through a bug or whatever the case may be. This, as you can see, it's hidden pretty much everything. We've hidden the sidebar, we've hidden the status bar, the top menus hidden. Like we don't even have you can't even see the different files we've got open. I only have one file open at the moment anyway, but you can Control Tab to get between the files. But yeah, this is like it's a focus mode. Like we've hidden everything that could be a potential distraction, just so we can focus on the thing that we're currently trying to do. Control KZ to get back out of that. There are a bunch of settings for Zen mode as well. So let's say that it's actually maybe a little bit too aggressive. I do still want to have line numbers in here. I can say that, well, no, don't hide the line numbers. Go back into Zen mode. So I can still have my line numbers in there because I find that useful, so I can navigate up and down, or I know where I'm at and things like that. Customize it for the way that you want to use it. It's not just it's not just trying to be an editor that is generic and it forces you to work in a particular way. No, you customize it for the needs that you've got. And I'm just going to turn that back on so that my Zen mode is nice, clean. From an accessibility standpoint, there's been a lot of work in VS Code to make that an easy editor to use, and something that I think that people don't consider too much. And I know I didn't consider this for a long time, but I used to work with a colleague who has albinoism, and he had very poor eyesight as a result of that. So he had to have his font incredibly large so that he could read it and that kind of stuff. But that can be a problem when you're working on code files, because we tend to, well, I'm lazy, so I just write things as long as I can. Like I've got a giant screen at home and a reasonable enough eyesight, so I'm quite content to have hundreds and hundreds of characters spread across a 32-inch monitor, because that's my working experience. But that might not be great for everyone on the team. So we can turn on editor rules in VS Code. Whoops, let me just Control K, Control U to comment and uncomment. So Control K U is uncomment, Control K C is to comment. But there we go. So I've turned on some editor rules, and so you can see these lines there, or you can maybe make it a bit get that real retro experience and just have a whole heap of scan lines across the screen. But you can then customize the colors for them, and it can be useful. It's like, well, we want to keep to it like an 80 character width, because we know that there's someone on our team that that's kind of the width of code that they can show at any point in time. So we just want to be mindful of that. So we have an indicator in there, or you're working on something that's got to be shipped to a mainframe, and it is actually like an 80 character width terminal that they're going to be working with. So you want to know where 80 characters is, or you're one of those people that is militant about, no, it doesn't matter that we can have a curved 49-inch monitor around us. I am going to have a fixed width of 80 characters in my text editor, because that's what I grew up with coding. But yeah, it's just like it's kind of one of those random little features that I think can be useful, particularly when you're considering how other people are also going to be working on a code base or something like that for you. But we'll turn them off because they might be a little bit distracting. Another kind of, actually I should have kept that open, Control-Shift-T, open the last file. Another thing that is useful, and I tend to forget to turn it on, because I add it for like the demos that I do, then I take it out because I try to clean up my workspace beforehand and then forget to put it back in. They're called code actions on save. So you want to perform something when the file is being saved. That's what code actions on save. Code action on save. And whoops, we can get it to do a variety of different things. So Control space. One of those is organize imports. So we're going to set that to true. So let's say that we're working on like a JavaScript file, one here, and we've got a linting rule where we want to keep the order of our imports in an alphabetical manner. It's a fairly common linting rule. Well, I've got them a bit backwards here because I want the destructor imports at the very top. So I can go Control-Shift-P and then organize imports, or Shift-Alt-O is the default shortcut key for that one. I can hit it and it's going to do that for me. Or with code actions on save, now as soon as I hit Control-S to save the file, it's going to just run that for me. It's a useful little thing, particularly if those are the sorts of things that you're putting in your linting rules. There's also another one in there for Fixall, so it'll if you've got a linter installed that is going to be applying fixing rules, it can try and run those for you. So ESLint, it'll try and apply those fixes to the file as you hit save. So just little quality of life improvements that are there. Let's come back. The last one from a setting standpoint that could be useful is this default editor language. what it will do is it will attempt to work out from the workspace what is the most common programming language of the files that are in there. And when you do Control-N to create a new file, it will assign that language service to the new file. So you immediately get your code completion turned on for the file. You immediately get the correct like syntax highlighting and colorizations and stuff like that. But you can actually override that setting. So I want new files in this repo to be always defaulted to Markdown, for example. Like I do that for my my blog is written in Markdown, so I default the files to always be Markdown unless I change the file with Control-KM. Control-KM, not Control-K, Control-M, Control-KM, and that's how we can change the language of a file. So yeah, but you can let VS Code attempt to figure out what should be the default language for a new file, or you can force that with settings. Active editor language is the default that's there. All right. We'll come back to slides for a minute, because I want to talk about extensions. VS Code has a huge amount of extensibility, and out of that has grown a massive extensions ecosystem. Everyone's going to have their favorite extension that you should have installed, or that they believe is it's going to change the way that you use VS Code. And there are literally thousands of extensions, so I am not going to cover them all off in here. I'm just going to talk about a couple that I think are really useful and that I've got installed on my machine. And they're generic ones. They're not specific to a particular programming language or anything like that. So these are 6 top ones for me. Editor config for VS Code. So editor config, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a file that you can put into a repo that you use to define set default things about a file. Like, what is the default line encoding? How many are we using tabs or spaces? What's the default indentation depth? And you can then set that for different for different files. So maybe your bash files, they need to have an LF as the default line encoding, whereas other files you might want to have a CRLF as the line encoding. And then you can, and so that one's a useful one just to enforce standardization inside of a code base. GitHub pull requests and issues, just manage all your GitHub stuff, pull requests and issues aspects of GitHub from within VS Code. Don't have to jump out to the website, don't have to jump out to the GitHub desktop application or anything like that. Just do it from VS Code. REST client. If you're doing anything that involves calling APIs, REST client is so useful. It's the same as like Postman and Insomniac and all those sorts of tools. So it allows you to invoke HTTP requests. But the advantage of REST client is that you create a file and then you just execute the things out of that file. So you can have your examples of how to call an API as a file that you just check in part of your Git repo. And then it's all there. It's all in the one location. And you can then execute those from inside of VS Code. Peacock, this was actually written by a colleague of mine at Microsoft, and it's what it does is it changes the colors of the borders of VS Code. So you would have seen the one that I had. Where is it? It's my lovely background. So see how this has got the green around it? Peacock's done that. So if you've got a couple of VS Code instances open, maybe you want to you set different colors on them so you know which one it is as you're alt-tabbing between your windows. Code spell checker. Funny story was when I was working for a company a number of years ago, we were building a custom CRM, and we needed to keep track of person name history because if someone changed their name, we needed to track that. So we created a table called person name history. Well, so we thought that's what we named the table. It wasn't until several months later that we realized that we'd actually named the table person name HisTroy. We'd also written a custom ORM. It had generated a whole bunch of C# code from the database, so we had all these classes called person name HisTroy. You would get back a collection of person name HisTroys and all that kind of stuff. It was then this was then in testing, and it was too hard to go back and fix it. So we're like, oh well, we're shipping to production with person name HisTroys. You want an extension like this one, like code spell check, to make sure you don't do that. And I'm just horrendously bad at spelling at the best of times, so I use that on my blog, and it's just so nice, and that I can just not have to worry about that. And then the last one is to-do highlight. So to-do highlight I actually like to use with the GitHub one. So where you put like whack, or like put a comment in, to-do, I'm totally going to fix this code later. And you're totally going to come back and do that right. What to-do highlight will do is it will actually find all of those and give you a list of that. Like you can see that within inside of VS Code. Like here's all the to-dos you've got within inside of the solution. But then I combine that with the GitHub pull requests and issues so that you just select that to-do and then immediately create a GitHub issue out of that, so that it's not just in the code base that you're totally going to fix it later. It's also in your GitHub issues that you're totally going to come back and fix. And it just gets deprioritized down the backlog. These 6 are they're ones that I find really useful. And like I said, these aren't specific to any kind of programming. Like whether you're writing Markdown or Python or .NET or whatever, these can all help out there. But I'm a web developer at heart, so I want to talk about a couple of my favorite web developer or JavaScript developer extensions. And it seems my animations are not quite right. Prettier. So if you're doing JavaScript projects, Prettier is kind of like, it's the de facto standard, I think, at the moment for doing code formatting for JavaScript applications. It also does like HTML and CSS and I think a couple other languages, Markdown, stuff like that. There is an extension for VS Code so that like you don't have to do anything. It just it includes it, and then you can set that as the default formatter for the right files, like your JavaScript files. So when you in VS Code, you can tell it to format the file, it will execute Prettier for you. Combine that with ESLint, so then you can get your linting rules, the linting information surfaced up with inside of the editor, so you can quickly jump around and find those without having to wait until the CI build has failed because you didn't run you didn't run your linter before pushing. NPM, this is just a useful extension for working with NPM. It will, when you're working in a package JSON file, you can do control space on the version, and it will show you the versions available for that package, and also give you like the Semver syntax for it. So like, do you want the hat, or do you want a star, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, you can make sure you lock your packages to the right point. And the last one is we shipped for VS Code a bunch of an extension for Edge, so that you can do like work with the browser from VS Code. And I'm going to have a crack at actually testing that one out now, because I totally didn't just try and do this before I came to into the room for the session. This was all pre-planned and done. This is the DDD Perth website. I pulled it down. Let's do npm start, and we'll see if that works. There we go. And I do have the Edge extension installed. So the Edge extension, I think it also works with Chrome to a degree, because it's Chromium browsers. But this is not working. Fantastic. All right. I had to do like npm build. I think npm run build. I totally didn't read that README either, so I was just like, I can clone this, run npm install, and yeah, like everything will be fine. Yep. That might not be fine. That's going to take a while. Let's try. I'll show us a slightly different one of it that does work, but not quite as much as I wanted there. Another one from there, task, and then these are scripts that I've already got inside of my repo that I can run. This is my blog. I'm just going to run the little web server for that. It's open, and now I'm going to use the Edge extension, which I've got installed here, and there it is. I have my website there, and I want to hit open. So there we go. I do apologize that it is going to be very cramped because it's all zoomed in for the editor, but there's my website on one side, and there's a DOM inspector on the other side. So I could go, hey, let's find that element. So I can all that DOM inspectory goodness that's there. I have the CSS information there. You probably can't read that unless you're in the front few rows, but I'm actually using Sass to instead of like raw CSS, so I'm compiling that down to CSS, and that's telling me this is banner.scss file. And if I wasn't using it in the way that I'm using it, I could actually click through to that file and we'll go to the file on disk. Unfortunately, it's not working in this particular VS Code instance because I'm connected to a remote machine and it doesn't so it can't access the file system properly to do that pass through. That's why I was trying to get this one up and running, and it's a good idea that I didn't wait for that because it's still building. But if you're working with it just directly on your Mac or Windows machine or Linux machine, then you can click through to that file. If you edit in the styles editor inside of this extension here, it will actually push those to the file on disk. So it's just full real-time feedback loop that you get there. Yeah, it's a really nifty extension, and I'm not just trying to pimp it because I work for Microsoft and I think Edge is actually a decent browser. Being able to having everything contextually in the one location, I find is quite useful. All right. Now, I did consulting work for nearly a decade before joining Microsoft, and something that was always frustrating when I was doing my consulting work was that I would come to a new client and they're like, cool, welcome, here's your machine. Boom, big pile of paper. That's the setup guide for your machine. We'll see you at the end of the week. Who's experienced something like that? I'm seeing a lot of heads nod. Yeah, and you're just like, I feel bad because I know how much I'm billing for you to be here, and you're telling me it's going to take me a week before I can be productive because I've got to, and you go through it and then it doesn't work anyway. Oh yeah, sorry. It turns out that no, we're actually using the newer version of Redis. Sorry, just not the old version that's listed in there. You actually got to download the newer. Can you upgrade that? Or oh yeah, we forgot to add this step. Or actually, can you go talk to this person on the other side of the room? Because they're going to have to help you. Because yeah, we haven't documented some of the new stuff that they've added to the environment. And it's so frustrating. But with VS Code, one of the things we can do with that is I mentioned before, editor config and things like that, just to enforce some code standardization. But you can even do that to the point of editor standardization, where we can have inside of our .vs code folder. We can include things like settings. So settings that are specific for this repo. So when you open this repo in VS Code, these settings are going to be applied. So if you've got a default file extension that you want to set, you could set that just for this project so that you opened up. You're not having to set this on a machine-wide config. Another one, I don't have it in this one, but I think I might have it in, actually no, I'll have it in here maybe. I have so many, there's so many things open. Whoops, let's collapse that. Now, you can also include, I don't have extensions in this one either. But I know where it was. I did see one earlier. Inside of this VS Code folder, extensions. So these are recommended extensions that you should have to work on this particular project. So they're encouraging you to install the Chrome debugger, which ironically is actually deprecated. They're recommending that you install editor config and Prettier and ESLint. So what will happen is when you open up this folder in VS Code, if you don't have those extensions installed, you'll get a notice saying there are recommended extensions. Would you like to install them? So that way you can make sure that everyone's kind of got that same sort of development experience. But let's go back into the slides. In a moment, there we go. But there's another level we can take this to, and that's with a feature of VS Code called dev containers. So a dev container is a way to Dockerize the development environment that you're working in, or Dockerize the thing that you're building with, and then because it's in your environment's in a Docker container, you can control what's there. So you can pre-install the correct version of Node or .NET or Go or whatever runtime you're working with. You can pre-install a database, and I'm going to keep just dropping in and out of my slides. So this project, yep, this one here. So this is one of my open source projects. It's a F# project. If anyone wants to talk F#, come see me. I'm probably the only person here that actually cares about that, but it's awesome. And if you're a .NET developer, learn F#. But this is a project for working with Cosmos DB from F#. But for local development, well, I don't have to spin up an Azure resource for Cosmos DB, or if someone wants to come along and contribute a fix to it or a feature or anything like that, I don't want them to have to stand up an Azure account, stand up a Cosmos instance inside of there. So I have a dev container that does that for you. This one is using Docker Compose. So it has the environment that you're going to be actually developing with inside of. So this will pre-install the .NET runtime for you, the correct version, because I'm working on .NET 6. So that'll all be pre-installed for you, plus a few tools for working with F#. But then I have another Docker container that started up next to it, which is going to be the Cosmos DB emulator. I then also, when I open in VS Code, it detects this dev container and says, hey, do you want to run this as a dev container? You do that, it will start this all up. It will start up the Docker container side by side, and now I can do full local development, and I haven't had to install anything other than Docker and VS Code. And then when I'm finished working on this, delete the repo off my machine, and I don't have to uninstall the Cosmos emulator. I don't have to uninstall the .NET framework or anything like that. It's all isolated. And what this means is that, it's very easy to come across as an open source contributor, pick up a project, clone it, open it, and have all this, all the environment ready to go. You haven't had to read a massive contributing guide or anything like that. The next kind of power of this is that if you're working with GitHub Codespaces, when you open it in Codespaces, it will detect the dev container and provision the codespace to those specifications for you. The GitHub folks over at the booth actually have this running with another project of mine where it is running a Cosmos DB emulator and a Docker container side by side inside of Codespaces, and they're running that from a Raspberry Pi. So you're doing full development with 2 running Docker containers off a Raspberry Pi. But dev containers are really useful for doing this remote, this pre-provisioned environment, and it can save so much time, having to install this, keep these docs up to date. This is the right version of whatever the dependency is that we need to install. You have it all there, pre-built and combined into this one folder. All right, we've got about. I'm going to leave some time for questions at the end. So we'll go for about probably 10 minutes left, I think. I'm getting some vagueness on that. I'm also the thing that's standing between everyone and lunch. So I talked a bit about Codespaces, but there is one other thing that I will show off because I think it is super cool, particularly in the fact that a lot more of us are working from home. Now, I've got to find the right VS Code instance that I have open. Where is it? Here, and I have so many VS Codes. Where are all the VS Codes? It's not that one. Is it this one? No, I don't have it on any of them. There's an extension that I'm going to install called LiveShare. And this should actually install pretty quickly because I already have it done. LiveShare, there we go. Okay, so LiveShare is a extension that, I guess you'd call it a product, that we created at Microsoft for doing remote pair programming, I guess is probably a good way to do it, a good way to describe it. So with LiveShare, I'm going to hit share now that I've installed that. And what it's going to do is it's going to start up a collaboration session from my machine. And this is probably going to not go as fast as I would like it to go, and that's going to be very depressing. But by doing this, I'll then end up with a URL that I can give out to someone that I might be pair programming with, and they can connect from their machine to essentially my VS Code instance. But they don't actually have to have VS Code installed. They can do it directly from the browser. They could open it up in full Visual Studio. And LiveShare actually works with Visual Studio as well as VS Code. Let's hit share again. There we go. Oh, cool. We're going to do a sign-in dance. Everyone's going to learn my password to GitHub. Nope, I should be already authenticated, so it's done. Okay. This collaboration session, come on. There we go. Okay, so that is open. We we don't need that. I want to grab the URL when it starts. Here we go. OK. Session details. Copy a link. Excellent. Now, I'm going to paste this into the browser, and it's going to start VS Code in the browser. So here we go. And it's going to take a few minutes, or hopefully not a few minutes. It's going to take a little bit of time because what it's doing is it's talking then to my laptop, which is actually going, I'm going to continue on the web, which is going over the 5G connection on my phone. Continue as anonymous. Yeah, we'll call that guest user. And they are going to be able to see like all the files on my machine. They're also going to be able to connect to the locally running web server that I've got, so they can view the website, well, which happens to be my blog. Yep, there we go. So there's all the files starting to come in. I can open up, let's just pick a random file. Let's pick this package.json. It's going to have syntax highlighting and colorization, and all that kind of stuff in there. But then as the host of this collaboration session, I can see here's guest user 7 there on that file and that line. I can go follow participant. Let's just close off some of these. OK. Oh, sorry, focus participant. No. Follow to the side. And there we go. I can see that's where guest user is. There's a little purple caret here, which is where they are. Put these side by side-ish. And let's go. Come on. Need more space on my screen. So zoomed in. OK, and you can see as that guest user clicks around, we can see what they're doing. And then if I was to come into, let's go into here. I want to come into my GraphQL file. Here we go. So I can like remotely that person, like I can see in real time what's happening. If I'm making changes in one editor, those will be reflected. So if I was to do that, those changes will be reflected across. I said they get full debugging. They can set breakpoints and all that sort of stuff, which is really useful if you're doing remote stuff, pair programming, pull request reviews. You just jump on a call using whatever conference calling platform you have choice, and just be like, hey, can we walk through this together? Here's a live share link. Actually, live share has built-in audio support as well, so you don't even need a separate conference calling platform. But yeah, it's like, let's just walk through this code together. Show me how that fix is applied, and all that kind of fun stuff. And the very last thing about VS Code that I want to tell you is that they have a TikTok account. I don't know what that is because I am too old for TikTok, but there it is. Yeah, yep. TikTok.com/@VSCode. Yeah, for the younger people in the room, you might enjoy that. Like I said, I'm just too old for TikTok, but it's there. I've watched a bunch of the videos. Like they're pretty funny, but there's also a bunch of like really useful, informative things in there. Like, did you know? I learned from watching one of their TikToks that you can change the scroll back history in the terminal. By default, it's like 1,000 lines. But if you're doing something that might be outputting more than that, you can change the scroll back depth, and you can. And I learned that from TikTok. Yeah, I'm like so hip and cool and young. And look, there's 1,001 other things that you can do with VS Code, but I'm just about out of time. I want to again thank our sponsors for making sure that DDD Perth could happen again this year. I'm glad to be back at a DDD event. I'm glad to be back at in-person conferences, even though I'd forgotten just how exhausting they are. I'm pretty sure my voice will give out before the end of the day. But we've got a couple of minutes for questions, or you can run off and grab lunch early. At the very least, thanks for coming to my session today. I hope you've learned a couple of tips and tricks for working with VS Code. And do feel free to reach out after the session as well if you want. Yeah. Thank you.